Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista. Welcome to the hurricane and tropical weather outlook that we do every single day. Today is May 17th, 2024. Let's get started, shall we? First, starting with the NHC homepage, just to kind of see what the NHC shows right now. And in the Atlantic, there is nothing expected for the next 7 days. And in the Eastern Pacific, there is stuff going on. But if you remember, yesterday, this area right here, this disturbance near Mexico, was a medium chance. Today, it's been downgraded down to a low chance, only around 20%. Model support has really dropped for anything occurring in the Eastern Pacific over the next week. And I'll show you the drastic difference, especially in the GFS model, where they showed a really intense system developing off the coast of Mexico yesterday. And today, there is absolutely nothing there. And then there's another area of interest to the west of that, but this only has a 30% chance, and it'll likely not really develop or have enough time to do much anyways, in terms of development. And taking a look at the satellite loop of the Eastern Pacific, you can kind of see why we're not really seeing too much getting going. Number one, there's a lot of dry air in the vicinity of these, so maybe there is dry air kind of impinging on development further. But I think the main issue is that this is really embedded in this monsoon trough situation in the Eastern Pacific. Kind of have a lot of vorticity just really stretched out. And nothing is really concentrating over one area. We talk about a hurricane, and we always talk about how it has to have a compact structure in order for there to be stuff like an eye wall. It's all around a compact structure, and it's not just stretched out and messy. Well, some hurricanes are messy, but especially when we're looking at a developing storm, we usually look at a small area where clouds and thunderstorms are condensed over the low-level center. And we don't really have any sort of situation like that definitely occurring right now in the Eastern Pacific. We just have all this energy strewn out across the Eastern Pacific. And maybe that's also has to do partially with the flaw of the GFS that GFS tends to have. And it's been well known that the GFS has this, especially in the Atlantic, but in the Eastern Pacific too. The GFS has this bias, we like to call it a bias that the GFS has, where it tends to over concentrate vorticity over a single area, and it's part of convective feedback issue that the GFS has, which is maybe why a lot of people thought that something would develop. But there were other models like the European, on the other hand, which in contrast to the GFS, they showed absolutely nothing developing. And we'll show you, looks like the European might be right in this situation. But really quickly, meant to show that as the next thing instead of after the GFS, which I have pulled up, which is what we're going to go over next. But now I want to look at the 850 millibar vorticity. And just to kind of show you, we have all these vorticity areas kind of just connected and stretched out with each other. Sure, we might have some vort maxes in certain areas, but it's not strong, it's not really that pronounced, and it's certainly not condensed and more circular, or anything like a signature that we would look for in any sort of developing tropical system. And I guess the GFS really plays into that idea today that nothing is really going to come out of the Eastern Pacific. And we could show that with the 12Z run, and I'm just going to kind of skim through this. Already into hour 96, and as we get towards hour 125 days out, not even a week, and you can see just nothing happens. We kind of have this ITCZ situation around just there, and you can kind of see maybe some sort of low pressure area begins to develop briefly, but then nothing just happens, and we kind of just stay dull in the Eastern Pacific. And we could even forward that out to hour 168. Absolutely nothing occurs. In contrast, especially when we go to hour 96, for instance, in contrast that to the 12Z run yesterday, they had and this is honestly just goes to show sometimes how much a difference a day makes. Yesterday, they had in the 12Z run a 979 millibar, probably hurricane in the model, and even out to hour 144. Yesterday, which should have been 6 days out yesterday. Today it's 5 days out. They even had it getting down as low as 963 millibars, likely a major hurricane that the GFS was showing in the model off the coast of Mexico. Let's actually set that at hour 168, and just to compare back to what it shows today, you can kind of see where it shows any sort of low pressure occurring, but there is nothing. There's really nothing in comparison to show today compared to yesterday. Not even a single hint that a tropical system still might be there in the models. It is nothing, absolutely nothing, that the GFS has today. And if we take a look at the European, because a lot of people are mentioning that the GFS did go very aggressively in terms of development with this system, while the European, and I'll just really quickly skim through the model run right now all the way out to hour 168, you can see that the European has nothing. And we compare that to the 12Z run yesterday, you could also see they did not develop this at all. And that led to some questions. I guess some people did question that. But today, now given that the GFS dropped this storm, and the European was showing nothing, it appears as if the European was right. And obviously the GFS was once again kind of buying into some sort of convective bias, maybe, that it overdeveloped a certain area of convection. Nonetheless, though, if you really don't understand anything how it relates to model mechanics, it really is a very complex sort of situation. The bottom line is that all the models basically dropped any sort of major development in the Eastern Pacific, and obviously the National Hurricane Center reflected that with them reducing the chances of the area of interest we were talking about yesterday to today, where there's only a low chance for anything to occur in the Eastern Pacific. I do want to bring up, though, climatology, because it is important to bring up climatology, I think. How does it relate, though, into the fact that we've not gotten anything yet in the Eastern Pacific? Well, this is a graph of the climatology map. I mean, we usually bring this up for the Atlantic too. This kind of graph where it shows the incline of activity throughout the year, and then obviously the decline towards the end of the year. There's infamously a lot of people like to bring that map up for the Atlantic activity, but there's also one for the Eastern Pacific too. And right now, when it comes to activity in the Eastern Pacific, we're kind of still only in the beginning stages. We've only just begun the Eastern Pacific 2 days ago. So we definitely have a long way to go for development to occur, especially in the Eastern Pacific, where we tend to get things a little bit earlier. You can kind of see we enter a first notable peak in the Eastern Pacific around July into early August. That's when we have a notable peak in activity, and also hurricanes too. And actually, very interesting, the hurricane peaks are almost equal in all three peaks that occur in the Eastern Pacific. Well, actually, there is kind of a fourth peak, but I guess in terms of main peaks. July is when we tend to see a lot of activity in the Eastern Pacific. Especially in the last several years, we've had at least one or so major hurricanes develop in the Eastern Pacific in July. So the bottom line I'm trying to say is we're just getting started. And if you think, oh, maybe this thing didn't develop in the Eastern Pacific is bad, not really. It's only the first storm. But given the fact that we're expecting a La Nina this year, the Eastern Pacific isn't expected to be too active anyway. So since we've gotten that all out of the way, want to shift gears now really quickly back to the Atlantic, since there really isn't much else to talk about. But this is an interesting tweet from Dr. Kim Wood. She tweeted this out today, actually, and mentions the May 16th daily sea surface temperature value for the Caribbean has reached an average of 29.19 Celsius, but the catch is she goes to mention that note that the peak value for September 20th is 29.11 Celsius in the Caribbean. So basically that means what she's implying is that we have surpassed the average daily sea surface temperature anomaly reading in the Caribbean that we see during the peak of the hurricane season, and we're still in May. And it just goes to show just how warm the Caribbean is. And we even have people in the comments saying this upcoming hurricane season has worried me. For sure, especially if we have a situation like this, we can look at that in the sea surface temperature anomalies. Basically, not one area in the Caribbean, or maybe if there is, it's very small spots throughout the Caribbean, areas that are below 1 degree Celsius in terms of departures from normal, in this case, above normal. The Caribbean overall is just very warm, and it gets even warmer as we head out into the MDR. It is just a very classic look for hurricane season. In terms of what we look at for an active hurricane season, the MDR is very warm. It's remained that way since the beginning of the year. And especially the Caribbean is very warm too. And that's especially important not only for the season in general, but for early season development. And you could throw in the Gulf there too, because warm sea surface temperature anomalies in the Caribbean and Gulf, especially early on, means that things will be able to take advantage of the heat there. And potentially, especially once we get into early June, and I'll actually talk about that in just a minute when it comes to early June. Bottom line, the fact that the Atlantic is already so warm, it does kind of have a boosting factor, at least when it comes to early season development. And the raw sea surface temperatures just show that. You could definitely imagine it's very warm. Widespread 28s, 29s. In fact, you barely see any areas registering in the Caribbean in terms of sea surface temperature anomalies below 28 degrees Celsius. And these are sea surface temperature, once again, these are sea surface temperatures that we tend to see at this magnitude in September during the peak. And this year, we're seeing them in May. It's quite incredible, honestly, and it definitely is concerning, especially when it comes to the picture that we're looking at for this hurricane season. And the Gulf is warmed up too. Almost the entire Gulf now is overtaken with readings of sea surface temperatures at or above 26 degrees Celsius. So the Gulf is warming up too. Summer is beginning to set into the southeast too. So I'd imagine in a few weeks, this entire area will kind of patch itself up, and we'll begin to see 26s kind of reach their way entirely to the shelf water of the northern Gulf Coast. And as I did mention as well, for early June, some people have mentioned it on Twitter, like people like Ben Knoll, the JMA forecast for early June, it looks like things could get slightly more favorable for the Atlantic and the Western Hemisphere in general. Really want to focus the attention on this graph right here. This is the CHI graph. Basically velocity potential in the upper atmosphere, or as we like to basically look at it, for lack of better words, the MJO. And you notice, not quite like the other graphs that we typically look at, where we look at green as the rising motion in the upper atmosphere. This graph is blue, but it means the same. If we look at the blues here, we notice that they're centered over the Western Hemisphere and into the Atlantic. And the time frame is days 17 to 30, so this is early to mid-June, rising air in the Atlantic, and even in portions of the far eastern East Pacific as well. So that would definitely tell us right on cue for the early part of hurricane season, rising air kind of settling itself over the Atlantic, and you could possibly assume maybe something could come out of the Atlantic around early June. Definitely seems like it is possible, given how warm the sea surface temperatures are, and just given the fact that the background state and just everything already is in place for lots of activity this year. It's definitely no secret that that is the case. So I guess we might as well be on our way soon towards having our first named storm somewhere. Whether it's the Eastern Pacific or Atlantic, it is definitely not far away. We're definitely now into the realm of the time period of which we definitely look at for these things to occur. It's just a matter of time before they start happening, and we'll see in a few weeks if we get development or not. We'll definitely watch out and kind of track if anything does occur, but obviously for right now, nothing happening right now, so definitely quiet. And it looks like it'll remain that way over the next week to 2 weeks. At least it seems for right now. That's going to do it, though, for this discussion for today. Really not much to talk about, but we'll still post one tomorrow. We'll try to do these daily, as I promised. If you did like what you saw today, though, and if you are new especially, would really encourage you if you subscribe. Turn on the notifications, too, so you can get whenever I post these videos right on the second instead of having to search through my channel. Because sometimes, the subscriptions kind of get buried, especially if you have a lot of subscriptions. I know how that is. It's very annoying. So get the notifications so you get when I post the video right on the second. that I post them, and that'll especially come handy during the peak season when we're dealing with big storms. You'll definitely want to turn those post notifications on. But most importantly, share with family and friends. Let's keep the community growing. Appreciate everybody new that has subscribed to me over the last several weeks. I see that a lot of people new have subscribed to me. I welcome you to the community, and hopefully we could welcome more people as well in the future. Stay safe, peace, love, and kindness to all, and we'll talk again tomorrow. See ya.